Very dedicated group of people across the continent are crafting a manifesto and have crafted a set of demands on what public services should look like on our continent.
This campaign, where we are reclaiming public service for all, this campaign should be held by all of the stakeholders. I can say community level, women, young people, and all of the people who are involved in the development process.
Having the Africa we want begins with everyone recognizing his or her role.
When you visit our hospitals and you see what is there, are you happy with what you see? Do you think that is the ideal? When you visit our schools, especially rural schools, those that do not have voices, the voice, are you happy with what you see? So it's basically about looking at what we are supposed to enjoy, especially as taxpayers. We do not ask for these as privileges. We don't ask for these as favors. We are asking for them as entitlement.
It is pretty devastating because we occasionally have stories of drug stock out in hospitals that it's a miracle for you to go to a public hospital and find medicines there.
This conversation about reclaiming public services is incredibly important and necessary. Privatization is a very well-acknowledged practice of corporate power. And despite the obvious evidence that it doesn't work and that it is not, in fact, providing the services that people need, in so many spaces that narrative continues.
In Zimbabwe, the government has failed to provide quality education accessible to ordinary people. You now have these small private entities, I don't know what we can call them, but they don't have a lot of money. They just buy maybe they just rent a small building in town, and then they open some kind of a school, and they say we're providing public service. But those schools are, look, they are terrible.
Government should not just leave the provision of these social services to the private actors, but government should be cognizant of the fact that they still bear the primary responsibilities of ensuring that social services are available. But primarily, one of the biggest issues which is provided for there is the fact that social services are a human right. Social services are not commodities to be afforded by only those that have the capacity to do so, or those that are well connected. We want everybody to be entitled to the social services which are supposed to be provided to all and sundry in Africa.
The Africa we want is one where citizens demand for quality public services and that governments adequately finance these services.
And I want us to work together to mobilize the people.
This is about you, and therefore, since it's about you, you must participate in this process.
Well, a very good morning, and thank you so much for keeping it NBS always, your political command center. Now, ever since the oil and gas resources were discovered in Hoima in 2006, it has been joy for the Ugandans living here. And since then, the regulatory framework has been put in place to ensure that at least by the time the commercialization comes in, at least there is a strong regulatory framework to ensure that you, a Ugandan, can benefit fully out of the oil and gas resources. And it is that particular conversation that we get to pick it from. And ISA, which is the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, has authored a 35-page report detailing how the African continent, majorly Africa, and specifically Uganda, can be able to harness her natural resources to be able to finance public services. You want to call it a basket of public service goods, right? Yes, and joining us right here in studio is a terrific panel. And seated right here is Gloria Sewekari, the Corporate Affairs Manager at the Petroleum Authority of Uganda. A very good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Hakim. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Well, gender balance has been embedded in this particular panel. That is why we are having Alana Kembabazi from the Initiative for Social and Economic Rights, and she does manage programs there. Alana, very good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
I'm glad to be here today and have this great discussion with esteemed colleagues.
And from the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament, the Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi. Very good morning, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, to be here and to meet people of oil. These ones have done research. I'm humbled.
Well, let us just give Alana the honors to detail and unpack for us what is embedded in the report. I've read the report, but for a Ugandan that is out there that has not read these 35 pages, what is in the report that is titled Harnessing Natural Resources for to finance public services?
So today I'm here to spread good news, Ugandans, and all Africans everywhere. We are wealthy. You have been taught you're poor, you have been taught you must depend on development aid, but endowed within us, and some of us already know, are incredible natural resources. I mean, if you look at, this report is looking at Africa, but if you come, for example, the East African Uganda level, the number of minerals. We hear about oil. I remember when we were young, they used to say we won't wait for Karamoja to develop, so I always thought it was very poor. Then I learned about gold. I feel like I've been learning about things slowly. We thought copper was gone, copper mines, we even ignored them. Guess what? We need them for renewable energy. Now they're busy thinking about how to rejuvenate the mines. Cobalt, lithium, uranium, you people like, we are rich. So that is the message of this report. We are rich. Therefore, if we are rich, why are our people failing to get drugs in public hospitals? Why can't we educate every child? So this report is really interrogating. Can we truly not afford to give a better standard of living to our people and enable them to live in dignity? Because the Bible says if you've been blessed with so much more is expected from you. Yeah. So if you have all of these resources, when you step up and make sure the person says, you know, the child of a rich person does not lack. Why have we determined that our people should lack? So this report interrogates. It also pulls on case studies from different countries. You know, we look at countries like Indonesia and Norway. Even here, Zambia, Botswana, and even go and look at places like Dubai and see how have they used their natural resources. What are the advantages? What can we learn? Because they said if you're forewarned, you're forearmed. Many of you have been very worried about the resource curse. Oh, the oil is here. Won't they steal it? Won't it cause conflict? It's been caused. How can you call it a resource curse? It's a blessing if you harness it well. And there are 3 key lessons we are learning. That one, we should be able to get these, a portion of them, to public services like health, education, and so forth. Every Ugandan, every African should feel these resources at their first interaction with the state, which is usually at our hospitals and schools. And number 2, the accountability measures matter. When you bring, even if you have poor money habits now and you suddenly won the lottery, it will go through your fingers. So the accountability mechanisms, we like playing around with things like the Public Finance Management Act. Our parliament has to approve this. We are like, no, we shall cut corners here. We shall do it this way. You know, we don't curb illicit financial flows. Companies will come here, dodge tax. They know who is who. They get away with it, particularly multinationals. So we are saying that it's very important right now as we start, right from the process of thinking about how we are going to use them, to also proactively put in place accountability measures, because countries that have been able to do so, and I'll talk a bit about later in the show, have been able to really harness these accountability measures and make it and be able to galvanize all the resources available. You want to make sure that when the revenues come, they're not leaking and going out. The other day I heard we did not tax gold. The OAG report was talking about it. At the start of the year, it was one of the first things we're discussing, that we didn't adequately tax gold. So it already shows that there are certain loopholes that we have. I'm very glad to see that government is here today, the different arms of government. Yes. Parliament and the executive. Of course, Parliament controls the finances and the issues of accountability and all of those things of the articles of the Constitution under that section. But also I would say that the other key thing for us to think about is how do we make sure, because we have rising debt right now, that was a key concern across African countries. We are spending more on servicing our debt, public debt, than we spend on healthcare, education, social protection. So how do we make sure that the revenues we get will not just go automatically there? So we must begin to curb our debt appetite, look very critically, do we need this loan? Like really assess it, you know, begin to join those other calls for debt cancellation, but also begin to think through how we can really make sure that we're not going to, you know, literally get from the ground and give to others. We keep saying that Africa has been called a poor country, but it's not true. It's actually been a site of exploitation where countries and companies come and take. They even lend to you on the basis that you have, you know, it's like when you lend, when members of parliament get sworn in, and you lend them money, you know, they are going to be in things, so there will be most of their resources are coming in. So those who are not very cautious sometimes fall into that trap. You hear the Speaker of Parliament saying all this. So as Uganda, as African countries, we really must wake up. Enough is enough. We must have better quality of life for our people. That includes free healthcare and education for people.
Certainly.
At minimum.
And I agree totally when you bring up these accountability issues. I'm glad we are seated right to the people, next to the people that appropriate and say, yes, Gloria, this is what you're getting. So, Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi,
first from oil.
You would have wanted to hear more from the person that you give the money.
Yeah, before I make my...
Gloria, you receive money from Parliament. I want to believe that they appropriate what goes to which ministry, which authority. Do you want to agree with some of the findings of this report? It speaks about that paradox and a puzzle that is quite unsolved. Oil rich, very broke people. At the end, where do you find the disconnect? So first, do you agree with the findings of the report? And what are you doing at the authority to ensure that that oil in Chikube is reaching out to a certain Mama Angina down still in Hoima?
Thank you very much, Hakim, and thank you, Alana and the ISA team, for inviting us to be part of this dialogue. I think Alana aptly put it, African solutions for African problems. And some of the challenges that she pointed out that we have with public services are indeed present, but as the oil and gas sector, we believe that the management of the sector is providing a leeway to address some of these challenges. And the report, yes, came up with critical findings, and I liked the case studies that were put forward, because in management of the oil and gas sector, we have not gone at it alone. We have learned from those that have done well, and we've also learned from the pitfalls that other countries have been through. And so for us, one of the key lessons that we have learned from other oil-producing countries is that we must not wait for oil production to start, for revenues to come in from sale of crude oil, for us to see the benefits of this natural resource. And that is the gist of how we are regulating and managing the sector. So what I would have liked to see the report delve into, and maybe it could be part 2 of the report, is how are we maintaining the value that is coming into the sector right now. Earlier this week, New Vision had a headline that said, IMF predicts double-digit GDP growth for the country because of the investment in oil and gas. And so for us, when we are looking at how the revenues and the benefits that are coming in through the sector can contribute to improving public services, we are looking at it from the point of now that the work is going on. We all know that right now there are 4 flagship projects in the sector. 2 projects to produce the oil, that's Tilenga and Kingfisher in Bulisa, Nwoya and Chikube Hoima districts. Those projects are bringing in investments of close to $8 billion in the next, from 2021 when the agreements were signed and 2022 when FID was taken, up to when we see commercial production. Those projects are bringing in close to $8 billion US. Now, when you come to the projects to commercialize the resources, the East African Crude Oil Pipeline and the Uganda Refinery Project, those projects are bringing in an additional close to another $8 billion 5 billion for the pipeline and about 4 billion for the refinery. So what are we doing to ensure that that investment that's coming in, we do not see capital flight? And so there are two ways. So rather than focus only on the revenues that come in when we start selling crude oil, it's important for us to appreciate the value and impact we have right now as the sector is developing. So allow me to talk briefly about what we are doing as the regulatory authority to ensure that that benefit that's coming in is retained. So the retention of this value and benefit is in two ways. One is we look at national content development. How are Ugandan businesses participating in the sector? Because when you improve people's incomes, they are able to afford services. When you give people, when you put in place infrastructure, you're making, infrastructure is one of the, facilities for production, for people to go to school, go to hospital, access markets for their goods and services. So we are looking at, first of all, Ugandan businesses participating in the sector. Of this money that I've spoken about, close to 15 billion that's being invested in the projects, we have contracts worth almost 5 billion that have already gone out to different companies. And we've seen Ugandan companies retaining value of close to $2 billion US. Now, this is through Ugandan companies providing goods and services like doing construction work, etc. Now, when it comes to improving public services, as the sector is developing, one of the lessons we learned from other countries, as is pointed out in the report, is that it's important to improve public infrastructure for the general populace. And so one of the areas that government emphasized was to develop roads in the area, because much of that area was remote before these activities started. And it's possible to produce oil from remote areas.
Certainly.
But government took a strategic decision. Let us improve the road services. Let us improve the other facilities in the area so that as the companies come in, the areas are also developed. And if you go to Hoima, Bulisa now, and compare from 5-6 years ago, it's a changed area. The towns, the cities, Hoima is now a city. It is changed. There's better public services. Then secondly, I think it's also important to appreciate that the oil and gas sector, we all know, is finite in nature, meaning that you produce oil and it will get finished. But Uganda as a country, we've been relying on agriculture, on tourism, on all these other sectors to contribute to our GDP. So one of the areas that we are looking at as the authority is how can the oil and gas sector create a positive impact on other sectors of the economy that most of the populace rely on. So we've worked with other players. We're not working alone. So we've worked with like the Economic Policy Research Center that has done a study on the linkage between oil and agriculture. We've worked with Uganda Health Marketing Group that has done a study on how can the health sector improve as a result of the oil and gas sector. And this is looking at opportunities both in terms of what government can do, but also what we are privatized economy, what the public sector can do. So there are opportunities to improve healthcare infrastructure in the regions that this infrastructure is developing. And these opportunities have been documented and mapped out. We've also looked at the tourism potential because many people are coming into this area. Right now, we have over 14,000 people working in the area. So you have all these people coming in. When they come, they go to our hotels. Some people go to the national parks, you know, they want to see the water bodies, etc. And so there's opportunity for tourism, there's opportunity for that infrastructure to develop. And when this develops, it is providing jobs to people. It is providing access to better services for the people. And so we are looking at the benefits and the value that the natural resources bring, both in terms of the direct benefits, but also the indirect benefits. Then maybe lastly is the important part of revenue that the report mainly focused on. The revenue that the oil and gas sector is bringing is not only coming in when we start production. Right now, the companies and their contractors that are operating in the sector pay taxes. And I think between 2010 to end of 2023, there was close to $1.3 billion in taxation that came in through these players. They also pay non-tax revenues. They pay signing bonuses, surface rental fees, etc. So all that money comes and goes into the petroleum fund. Please don't ask me what the Petroleum Authority does with that money. Our job is to make sure that the companies are complying, and when the money is collected by Uganda Revenue Authority, it goes into the petroleum fund for appropriation. So I guess in summary, what I'm saying is that we have to take a broader look at the contribution that natural resources can bring to public services by looking at the now, that we are the benefits that are coming in through national content, through the tax and non-tax revenues coming in, but there's also the companies that are operating are being good corporate citizens. They are implementing social investment projects. They are skilling youth. If you go to institutes like Uganda Petroleum Institute in Chigumba, Chiriandongo District, St. Simon's Vocational Institute in Hoima, these institutes have benefited from programs, not only CSR, but livelihood improvement programs, and you have young people being trained in these areas. They have also contributed to health, developing health care and hospitals, upgrading hospitals and health centers within the communities. But this has mainly been within the host community level. And so when it comes to at a country level, at a broader level, it comes back to how the funds are appropriated and utilized to ensure that these benefits are seen in the population.
Certainly, and when I return to you, I will be asking you, ever since we started giving out contracts, mostly at Tier 1 and Tier 2, are we seeing a lot of technology transfer from the ones that are getting contracts at Tier 1 to see that we are seeing local companies getting back to that? So prepare for that. The Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, you've had, now that the money goes to the petroleum fund, you sit at the helm of a body that decides this is the chunk to go to the oil and gas sector. And coupled with that, you have competing priorities as a country. You have debt. If you look down the sub-Saharan Africa, we are burgeoning in about $10.119 billion. Uganda alone has already crossed the 90 trillion mark in debt. How are you looking at this in the face of dwindling external financing sources, and how are we seeing that the oil and gas revenues come in to finance a public investment agenda that a Ugandan like me and my mother out there want to see?
First of all, let me start by appreciating her research. I've had occasion, I can promise I'm going to read it again. I've had an opportunity to look at her research. It's amazing. A very good piece of work. Thank you so much. And I'll share it with a few of my friends. I've seen a huge content in it. But as a country, we must decide. As she has said, oil is a finite resource. You simply have it, you will exploit it, it will get finished. But countries have the clear path, how to use this finite resource to build infinite capability, okay? You build it for infinite and beyond. Okay. That you can use this opportunity where you have oil to build a capability that forever you'll never be the same again. In simple terms, I don't want to use technical words, that your people, your citizens, your country will never be the same again. Now, countries like Norway, she has touched about it, tried to put up this provident fund, the kind of the petroleum from which we benchmarked, and tried to do our own, when we were doing our own oil laws, and we set up the petroleum fund, where resources were ring-fenced to do two things. Definitely, as you have a resource, you must enjoy it. It's like you earn income. You cannot say, I earned all this income, I save it. You must survive. So we said, okay, a portion of it will go to budget support. And there is a law that speaks to it, how you can use this to support generally what she talks about, health, your general budget. The rest of it ring-fenced for infrastructure development, especially roads, renewable energy like construction of Karuma and other dams have been financed using revenues that came from oil. So that's a given. And I think, I know the extent because my committee looks at what is in the oil, in the petroleum fund. I know how much there is right now. A lot of it has been used, which is no problem. I mean, you don't get money, keep it there when you have problems and you are saying, you know, I'm looking at money. Even at a personal level, you cannot just look at money. You are dying of malaria, you are dying of that. Say, oh, come on, my bank account is so, when you are wasting away. So countries can't waste away because they are looking at a heap of money from oil. It definitely gets to be used. The question is on what and how. She has touched critical elements that in building for infinity and beyond, using a finite resource, the first key thing is to invest in people, human resource. So therefore, how do you build for human resource? You must upgrade your education capabilities. That is fund public education, fund public university, pre-primary, primary, build better schools, teacher ratio, pay workers well, and you'll have better citizens who have knowledge and skill that may not necessarily want to depend on hardcore oil, and they could be global citizens at the end of the day because we have empowered them. So countries have achieved that by exploiting oil. The question is, she has carried out a study in her report, how countries that have oil, what portion of the Abuja Declaration, what percentage of the budget goes on to those areas. She has avoided a bit of touching Uganda, I don't know why, in her research.
Because we are below.
It has a chapter on Uganda.
No, she has a chapter on Uganda, but when I looked at other countries, you could mention, you somehow scattered Uganda, how Uganda is faring. I've had a quick look at your report. So she has said, do countries invest in health? There's Dhaka and I think Abuja. Are they two? Yes. Dhaka and Abuja declarations. Are you investing money as per what you said you should? Definitely, Uganda is among countries that are not doing so. A large part of our education budget and health budget is donor supported. Yes. And that comes with, by the way, when you look at our budget that goes to health and education, minus the donors, we would collapse. Yes. That means we've got to get our money and invest it in those sectors. So is the oil money going to education? As of now, almost nearly zero. Now, but also what are we talking about? I looked at your numbers. By the time we are signing the first oil agreements, you are talking about 22 billion US dollars if a barrel of oil was to be sold at 50. That's what was over the course of 25 years of exploiting oil. But now the barrel of oil is nearly 100. 100. Yeah, it's 100 per barrel. So you'd say, per the current market price, you are looking at a potential of 44. That is our royalty, our net off. I'm not speaking about the volume of oil that she has talked about. What Uganda eventually, in terms of revenue, will earn. It's not pretty much money, by the way. That's why handling it carefully is a must. Because you don't have that much oil as Abu Dhabi or as Saudi Arabia. You are on the margin of profitability, viability of oil. We are not on the extreme saying we have so much oil reserves that you can afford to abuse it. We are not Angola. Okay? We are not even in Nigeria in terms of our capacity. We are on the fringes of viability. Then that's why it is very important to see that every penny of the $44 billion is used well. But what is our potential in agriculture, which she talked about? Our potential in agriculture, which is finite, which is infinite, is far much bigger than our potential in oil. So can we use the oil money to enhance this capability that will serve generations after generations? Let me go to minerals, generally, because her report doesn't touch only oil. Her report touches on all other minerals. Actually, our potential for other minerals far outstrips our potential for oil. So the question, yes, our potential for minerals, other minerals, gold, uranium, and what we have in other minerals is far outstrips our potential for oil. The question is, we are not investing there at much speed. Actually, so much study showed, had we first invested in harvesting these easy-to-pick minerals, we would never had to depend so much on the unnecessary sharing agreements, because we would have had our money. So had we been smarter, you don't blame the leadership. It's about a little bit of capacity. It came from the bush. They were not as well schooled like these ones, doing a lot of research. So they were literally of gamblers when they took over government.
But the Ministry of Energy says that it is working on the laws and ensuring that it is going to create a Uganda mining company that will then shoulder the commercial interests of the country in mining of other resources. Are we late to the party?
No, we are not late to the party, because we still have a lot of minerals down there. But the question is, even as we were suggesting, some of us were for a minerals fund, as you have a petroleum fund, have also a fund for minerals. The question is, the little we have is being taken for free. Actually, as we speak now, our gold, no taxes. Even though that want to pay, the other day, and it's because of our poor money. That's what says prudent management in our report is critical. We are supposed to get 600 billion on gold taxes. An instrument by cabinet and by the minister. We lost it to zero. When I have these mineral companies, I've looked at them in the report that are mining. Most of them have gone to the courts. The courts are slow to adjudicate a commercial case where a country is going to lose billions of money, a case there for 2 years. So you look at all these things and says, if you are going to benefit, okay, the judicial system must be fast to resolve commercial interests. Accountability must be there. These other things, these people who are doing research must do the needful from the country, full-time advocates, what we have and what we are doing. Are we there? My answer is no.
You also do oversight. I want to believe that everyone on this panel is looking at you. You sit at Parliament. What are you doing as a member of Parliament and together with the committee, and what are you telling the other members of Parliament to be able to help you with in terms of advocacy to see to it that the monies that are, the revenues that are coming in from the petroleum fund, which is already being, at least the monies are being touched, what are you doing to ensure that the monies go to the rightful places to help that low, that person at the bottom of the pyramid?
Yeah, that's a governance question. And these people who study also let us down. They do half the job. For example, and I'll be very honest here for intellectual purposes, a country must choose between the two paths. You are either perfect democracy or a perfect autocracy for you to benefit from oil. You have two examples. You have examples of Norway and other countries that are very democratic, okay? And they have benefited from oil. You also have perfect autocrats, like oil, the Asian oil-producing countries. Those that have really nipped it are not a democracy, okay? Now, for you, you are in between the two. You are neither an autocracy, nor are you a democracy. So you must, that's an area they cannot easily go into. But for us who are in the public arena, you're saying, if we've taken a democratic path, please go the full length, okay, and democratize. And make sure your governments are accountable to the people, their institutions, the IGG is working, the police is working, the political class is not a parasite, okay? On these resources, because you are building an administrative structure that takes away the gist of what they are producing, all these. So you've got, so our democracy is a challenge. How are you spending your money on defense, for example, and security? If you're going to spend so much money as we are doing on defense and security apparatus, on patronage, on so many advisors, on all these are taking away hard-earned money that would be useful. The question is, these who are doing research and most of the people who are planning for this country are not answering that question. And for me, as from this perspective, the governance question is key. You must address governance, including corporate governance of institutions like the petroleum company. These people who have oversight regulatory authority on oil, they must be democratic, they must ensure full accountability, they must be given. Are you there? So for me, the dark side of it, the risk side of it, is that our governance is still poor. And that one is likely to affect how fast we move to leverage our oil sector and mineral sector.
And maybe I want to believe that, Alana, these are some of the things that you have been able to note. Tying in with some of the recommendations of this particular report, what are some of the lessons that we can keep picking from the other jurisdictions and how they've been able to do it, as some of the countries having a governance question that they haven't answered, also being able to benefit from their oil and gas resources, and are they using them for the right purposes?
Yes. I think from the onset, what our research has found, you have to be very deliberate about allocating it to public services. So Botswana has a sustainable budget index, and slightly less than half was allocated to critical public services, health, education. Because the reality is, even if you have money in your pocket and you just don't have a plan, people are planning for your money if you don't know. Yeah. That's why they say pay yourself first. So the investing in the public services, and she talks about roads, which are very critical, health, education, you're paying yourself first. When you have a productive workforce, it will bring many more returns in terms of the economy and growth, because Africa is the workforce of the future. When we're petitioning the East Africa Legislative Assembly, this also came up because, again, we're looking at East Africa on public services. And again, we kept saying, you have so many. I think these are areas where we can begin to even think about at the East Africa level, what lessons, because we need to get a bit more united in curbing things like the tax evasion, the smuggling that's going to happen around the gold that's already happening, like a lot of issues like that. Getting back to governance, the law, despite its flaws, for example, the Public Finance Management Act has a number of things that are not followed. It has procedures on how things should be done when it comes to loans. It is very clear about why Parliament should appropriate, because it's supposed to hear the voice of the people. I mean, it has all these things which we sometimes think of as suggestions. Rule of law is very important. There are many countries that have had these resources that we don't feature here because they have not used them in a way they can easily enrich a particular elite, And so it's very, very important. And Parliament has two roles. A rule maker, you're the ones who pass the laws and make the laws, and also appropriation and managing oversight. So for example, the OAG report comes, this says, we haven't been levying enough, we haven't been collecting from the taxes we should have on gold. There has to be tangible results. But I want to get back to public services. The president has turned 80, so he should be thinking of his legacy. And he's talked a lot about public education. We must move, in this day and age, we should be giving 20,000 per child per year in a universal primary education school as capitation. You put 20,000, cannot bring me from my home here, and I go back comfortable. I'll be thinking, do I have something on my mobile money? But we think that's okay. And so I think we need to get back and say, on these critical areas, what are our needs? What percentage are we going to do so? Because you will be, of course, allocating a portion of which you'll be keeping. You don't use all of it at once, but you'll be thinking about where am I investing? And that conversation has to start early. And it's why ISA was very intentional about doing the research and starting the conversation early, because you can't really plan well in a crisis. You can't wait for the oil to really take up time, and then you start saying, now how are we going to use it? That's why people use up all their lottery earnings in a short time. So it's very important that we are deliberate and we're involving people. Let's have those conversations, because it's very easy for things to be very top down. We have a right to participation. When the oil companies are going in the communities, are they listening to people? Hearing about some of the concerns here? Because from there you will actually pick the shortfalls. No, this company is doing this, but actually, me when I began to get concerned about gold, I heard it from people. That they pass it, and I said, wait, what? Pardon? So there is a lot of information that's already out there in addition to the benchmarking that is happening. And then we hope to see that more cross-collaboration between the arms of government. I like to say we are really thinking about the future we want to leave our kids and our grandkids. Education should not be a privilege. You may be wealthy today as an MP, and maybe it ends with you. You're the last one in your family to be wealthy. Should your grandkids now, they hear, yes, we came from the mighty honorable, we were from this family, and I've seen them in villages. It was a mighty family. But the people are here, they're educated, and you look at and that's because we have made it such that in this country, your ability to advance depends on what is in your parents' pocket. We are saying we have a social contract with our government. And the minimum it should do is invest in health, in education, and that's why we're doing an Africa-wide campaign to say Africans wake up, demand investment in public health and education, and let's actually have a real conversation about where we can sustainably get the money without always running into debt, without overtaxing the woman who now you're going for the traders, you're squeezing them. But there is another pot here you haven't yet properly planned for, and which could be leaking if you don't block those leakages.
Gloria, you've heard from Parliament, it seems like we really need to rant, and when you go to civil society, the rants are even louder from the kitchen, from you, the people that are there down in the field. What are you hearing from the people? I've spoken to a couple of those. Some of them have been compensated, some others haven't. How are we advancing forward with this conversation of investment in public services that really work for the people? And from an employment perspective, the number really look good. Is this what one would call gainful employment for those that are in the sector?
Okay. Thank you. I think the governance question that has been raised is very important. I remember in the early, I think around 2010, 2011, when the laws were being developed, and we worked very closely with the Norwegian government. And so the governance question came up at that time. And their advice, Norwegians are very polite. They don't tell you what to do, they just advise you and you choose your own path. So the advice they gave was that yes, governance challenges may be there, but from the experience, the impact of the oil and gas sector does not only come in revenues, jobs, blah, 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 but even in governance, because the way it impacts other sectors of the economy that we've talked about, it also shines a spotlight on the country. And getting it right, even in just one sector of the economy, it has the impact to have the good things that you have done spread across the other sectors and the country at large. So that's why it was important for us, as a minimum, a foundation for the oil and gas sector, to get the governance right. Despite whatever challenges have been cited, I think Uganda has been spotlighted as one of the countries in Africa that are getting it right in terms of the oil and gas sector. Now, this is because our roles are clear. There's separation between what the ministry does, policy, the authority, we have regulatory oversight and independence from the ministry, and then the Uganda National Oil Company does the commercial business. And so having that foundation has given the sector an opportunity to develop based on regulatory best practice with lessons from other countries, but also in areas where there have been challenges, we have not shied away from the challenges, but have addressed them head on. Now, when it comes to going back down to the communities, to the people that we actually want to see the impact of the sector on these people. You talk about the numbers. We know that things like unemployment are a big challenge in our country. We have millions of youth. The universities are churning out thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of young people every day. But we have mapped out, we know where the opportunity in oil and gas stops in terms of employment. We know that oil and gas is not a mass employer. But yet again, we know that the skills that are acquired through things like technology transfer that you've mentioned, like if you have youth who have been exposed to global software that has used in the industry, they can work in any sector of the economy, they can work globally. So that is how we are looking at the opportunity even down to the person. We are saying, okay, not everyone will be employed in oil and gas. But if you have companies that are, for example, giving software, you know, a number of universities like Chambogo, Makerere, Uganda Petroleum Institute have gotten donations of software from the companies, global software that's paid for in hundreds millions of dollars per year. So these young people have access to these softwares. We had a skills expo earlier, last month actually in August at Chambogo University to talk to the young people about the sector. We are not saying that come and we employ all of you. What we are saying is that look out for the opportunity, get the skill that you have. If you have gotten an opportunity to study as a welder, like close to 15,000 young people have been trained in different certifications. Not all of them are working in oil and gas. Not all of them will have an opportunity to work in oil and gas. But we have people who are now telling us that, oh, I've set up a welding business in Luengo. I'm welding doors for hotels, for what? They're not working on the pipeline. But he got a skill through a training program that was brought by ECOP in the district. When he got the skill, he did not sit and say, I'm waiting to be employed. So what I'm saying is that much as the public sector has the responsibility to ensure that these public services are up to scratch for the populace, we also have to look at how the natural resource sector can impact other sectors of the economy. Agriculture, I'll give one more example from agriculture. We know that the oil and gas sector has some of the highest standards. Why? Because they're investing highly. If, for example, there is food poisoning on a camp and the rig that you see drilling the wells can't operate, that's almost $100,000 per day lost if it can't operate. So that's why the standards are high for even things like food. And we worked with the Export Promotion Board in doing that study on the opportunities in agriculture. And they say once a company can supply, then they are export ready. We've heard of stories of farmers failing. They export goods, let's say to Dubai or where, and they return them because they don't meet standards. So here they're saying once they meet these standards, they're export ready. So what the companies have done, they've set up local collection hubs, you know, to bring farmers together. And what are these standards? Clean your food. Don't bring your lumonde full of mud. Clean it and bring it. Package it, weigh it. You know how much it weighs. Those are the basic things, the basic skills that are being given to the people at the community level so that they are able to get opportunities. So now when these hotels set up, you know, now Hoima has so many hotels, all the banks are in Hoima, they are now going to Bulisa. This is the same food that they'll buy from these local communities.
Certainly.
So we are saying that as the government invests in public services, it's important that the communities, the young people are skilled and empowered to be able to also contribute to improving their standard of living.
Yeah, and Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, from the discussion and when you read down the report, recommendation 5 is saying adequately tax the natural resources and ensure that that money goes back to the country's coffers. Maybe then it will come from there and return to finance these public service goods that we are speaking about right here. How are we looking at the taxation laws relating to natural resources in the country? And if Gloria here is telling you about the good things that they are doing to ensure that the National Talent Register is maintained well and more people are coming on board, and then technology transfer and all these things, how are we looking at the taxation bit? We've spoken about the regulatory framework. We do not know how best you can make it a little stronger. What are you doing in that area?
The taxation part of it is fine. I believe we have adequate laws to ensure we optimize our take on the oil sector. For me, that's not the challenge. The laws are in place, by the way. When you look on a glance of it, she has talked about the Public Finance Management Act. When you go and read through, it's a fantastic piece of legislation. Well, of late, we know we need to panel beat it up here, but the framework is very good. When you look at our tax laws on oil and everything, fantastic. Good work done by the expert in finance, and there's no challenge. But for me, the low-hanging fruits in the oil sector, where you need to get it right, is one, for example, our audit processes. Okay? You audit from metering of oil. If you are going to, because you are not the one exploring oil. You are not the installer of the meters. You are not the owner of the technology. So have you built capacity to audit to the dot what comes out and how it is used? You are grappling with the recoverable costs. Okay? Are you auditing them up to date? The last time I looked at the figures, we are near now 10 billion in recovery cost, about 36 trillion, 37 trillion. When did you last audit to the dot? They are 3 years behind. And so you are not auditing with the judicial system must arbitrate these commercial cases so fast. Because any delay, you are letting people off the hook. Because what normally companies do, they simply go lodge in a case and seek an injunction, okay, on the action to pay tax. So they go on for 4 years without paying tax. The case is not being. Can you believe URA was stopped midway? Companies that agreed were paying. Some vigilante people went and just lodged a case. It has been there 2 years down the road. We are missing. And the judiciary wants more pay. So you must build all that capacity across the board. And so from audit to fast deciding of commercial cases regarding these minerals and oil, from advocacy, the civil society, from normal accountabilities of that the money you've got has gone to the right use of courses, jealously accounting for your petroleum fund withdrawal in accordance with the law established. So these are critical. You are speaking about the tax laws. The tax, I don't think we have a challenge there. The laws are clear on who will get what and when and how. The question is how you manage it.
Much as we don't seem to have any problem there, then you have another big problem in the room, the rising debt levels. The rising debt levels have an impact in such a way that debt has the first call on your money. Are you going to get money and take it to debt repayment, or are you using it for...
3 years ago, I was the shadow minister for finance. That is around 9. When we were hitting COVID, I produced a very fundamental document. Said, government should pause. Don't even cut expenditure. Just stay put, except for critical sectors like oil, maybe our security. Okay? Just stay where you are and don't incur other government expenditures, and then go in it for 3 years. For me, and then knock off. The first debt to knock off is this debt rollover. Because this is money borrowed internally that government cannot pay back to the owners to use. Yet you are paying huge interest on it. And it matures. You have already borrowed it. It matures from me. You borrow from her to pay this one. I said, can you... And you know what? Our economy has been doing amazingly. For the last 5 years, our revenues have been rising by almost 2 trillion. Then how mad are we that you raise revenue and you have less to spend as more revenues is generated? It's because as you raise revenue, your appetite to spend is much more than what you raise. So you are in a vicious circle of ever increasing the debt. for me, the things you spend money on are not so critical. I've looked through this government excess. There's an excess still. You can do it with 5 trillion, okay, of your budget and save that money. Do you have the political courage to do so? My answer is no. I don't want, because I'm here with experts. That I don't want to take them to that other angle is simply because you are politically sick. You cannot make these big decisions. These decisions may not be popular with some sections, and then you are a corrupt lot. So you've got to deal with those ones. And so for me, I don't even buy the World Bank. We cannot always depend on the remarks of the World Bank. The way IMF has said, our debt is sustainable. They want to lend you more. You get it? It was accumulated on, I've seen in our report here, in our report, we are back to saying we go for debt relief, okay? We go to begging for that, European countries. They will attach other conditionalities as you go for debt relief. So for me, I don't even share. I think we've gone the wrong way on debt management. And then we're also very indisciplined. How on earth do you have 10 trillion of the borrowed money undispersed? Then you have around 8 trillion dispatched and utilized in a financial year, and you're accumulating more debt. Even if you are running a kiosk like that, it will collapse. So it's because the country is such a sovereign entity, it's not easy to see collapsing. So should you get your oil and you still have this huge debt, okay, it's going to wipe it away. That's why I'm not very excited. Because you see, you'll have to now to say, okay, we now have oil. Can we now, this debt rollover, stop it? Go around it. And it'll take you 5 to 10 years, okay, to knock it off. If we stop borrowing. Therefore, the big animal in the room, no country can stop borrowing, okay? We will borrow, even the US. And for me, it's not even a question of the GDP. If people are saying 50%, it's because you are indisciplined. Japan GDP to debt ratio is over 200. USA to GDP ratio is over 100. Okay? The question is your capacity to pay. If you have no capacity to pay. So the IMF is excited. It's because it sees Uganda with the potential on mineral and oil, okay? For them, they want to milk that money. We forget that this is not free money. We forget that we don't control these West Bretton Woods institutions. They are still serving the white supremacy on earth. But the way these Africans sing, IMF has said, oh, no, it is all okay. It's as if they don't know their mission. So me, I'm not one of the people excited. Even when you see these ones, I didn't want to take them on that. I don't know at what level you are moving with the refinery. But my take is that the donor, these funding agencies, are more interested in the export of our oil than our capacity to refine our oil. That's why you are struggling with the refinery, but you are getting more resources because for them, they're saying, please take. That's where a little bit the president is a bit right to say, wait a minute. A portion of our oil should go to a refinery so that we stop this export. The question is, the donors are fighting that. They're telling you, no, you don't have capacity. But you have capacity to consume. We are consuming around 9 million liters of petroleum products every single day in Uganda. What if you produce it locally? How about the region? That is the country. How about the region? The capacity is enormous. You are speaking about the other one is population management, which they don't tackle. So many of, what's the population of Norway?
5 million.
5 million. Okay.
What's
the population of Norway?
What is
What is the population of Norway?
We cover different times,
yes.
by the way.
Yes. What
so
is
don't look at Norway now. We look at the lessons of when they were doing what
yes. What was it? Was about 3 million.
No, but
now, what's the population of Arab Emirates? Citizens, forget about the other. They're about 2 million. What's the population of these other oil companies? Now, you are dealing with a country. In the next 10 years, is going to knock 100 million. Or thereabout. 10 to 15 years, we are going to be 100 million people. Now, you have to match your research with how you are going to manage 100 million people. And for the research I'm reading, you are not there yet. Even I've listened to some of these economists. They are not answering those questions.
Certainly.
And I'm very, very worried, by the way.
Alana, how are we going to be able to manage?
I'm not going to get into the population debate because I think it's a longer debate, and I think actually having a good population, if it's educated, can be an asset. Africa is supposed to have the largest workforce of the future because we are young people. So you're going to need, it will be an asset if you harness it well. They must be educated. Which brings me to what Indonesia did. Indonesia at the height, this was about the 70s, decided to build like 61,000 schools. It was the biggest school expansion program, dealt with the teacher recruitment. Like they were like, it's like we go running. We have the money now, we go running on education. So that is the message we are trying to say right now. It's that if you're trying to deal with the problems of the future, you may not be able to predict them well, but what can you predict? Your workforce must be educated. To get tourism, you must have good health facilities here, but also to have a productive workforce, everyone must be able to get health care. They have ripple effects on the economy. But I know our time is running out, and I'm very glad to see this debate continuing to happen. The gaps in terms of governance are highlighted in our National Action Plan. Uganda's National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. Uganda is one of the few countries that has a National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights, and it sort of goes on the mining area, there is this problem. Or is there free prior and informed consent? I encourage everyone to look at it. My message now is to Ugandans and Africans. I agree with Honorable Chivume in a lot of ways. No one is coming to save you. So when you're blessed with certain resources, please properly plan for them, make sure they will trickle down to the people and actually help them invest in public services. Think about the legacy. Let them know, hey, we put this in place from our oil. Can you see it? Can't you see that we have these health centers? Can't we, think about the legacy you are leaving? Our leaders, it's very important you hear the young people, because many young people are watching this and wondering, they're eating the money for oil. How is it going to help me? That's where they are at. And we know for a fact, Ramadan Gobi likes saying, if a poor person is hungry, you will not sleep. And the rich, because they are hungry, they're not sleeping, you're not going to sleep either. So we need to begin to think about a Uganda that works for all. We invite you to join us in our campaign on demanding quality public services. Like I said, it's an Africa-wide campaign, but of course, ISA is based here, and so we have a special affinity to the issues that are happening here. And I hope we continue to have these discussions also at the international level on refining the financial architecture, issues of tax. We can have a whole debate on tax and curbing illicit financial flows. But some of those issues require concerted effort by Africans. And that's why demands around a strong UN tax convention that will cut these ways in which they try to dodge tax are very important. And of course, curbing our debt.
Certainly, and those are very, very critical recommendations. And if you speak about refining and changing the global financial architecture, I think Ruto will agree with you, and among many other African leaders. Gloria, how are you going to be able to support organizations such as ISA, your good partners, in ensuring that they advance the cause of ensuring that the oil resources or the natural resources are trickling down to that ordinary Ugandan in terms of health facilities, in terms of education facilities, among many others?
Yeah. So first of all, we thank ISA for the research. I think it's a good effort, a good starting point. And as I said, we are open to debate and dialogue more, especially in looking at, I think what the Honorable said is partly true, not getting too excited about, the prospects of the future, but we also have to recognize that there is an opportunity now. There's an impact the sector is having on the country and the communities now, and we need to continuously document those benefits, that impact, and see if there are any gaps or loopholes, how can we close them? And so I invite Isa to have a broader discussion on this. I know research is usually sometimes limited in scope, but I think that we will have missed the point of doing all the lessons and benchmarking if we do not look at the now, how we can continuously retain the value that's coming into the country. And then I would also like to say, just briefly, I do not speak for the mining sector, but we are in the same policy paper, should I say.
Sure.
And I think the mining sector, the challenges have been acknowledged. The new law that was passed is now being implemented to reorganize the sector. A lot of the leakages were as a result of the huge informal artisanal mining sector that is now recognized in law, is being organized. And so I believe that the Ministry of Energy is taking forward the implementation of the law to close these loopholes and working with different partners, both within government and out of government. So I take this opportunity to thank also NBS for providing the platform for this debate and encourage that let us continuously dialogue based on research. Research is very important, but also we need to recognize where we are, the milestones we have in our journey to reach commercial production.
Gloria Serikali, many thanks for getting time to speak to us. The Honorable Mwanga Chivumbi, you have exactly 1 minute to give your parting shots about this particular research.
I was excited by her pronouncement at the beginning. Very, very revolutionary to tell people, oh, wait a minute, you people are rich. That Uganda, you are rich. Therefore, what she didn't say, don't accept to be poor.
That should get us out of here. That should get us out of here. You are very rich, but why are you very broke? So those are the discussions, and that has been the discussion for you. How should we be able to at least harness our natural resources to ensure that they trickle down? You see, if we are talking about an economy that is burgeoning in 50 billion United States dollars, do you feel it in your pockets? I doubt you're not. How do we connect that disconnect? That has been the discussion. And if you read the report further, you will be able to identify some of those areas. Glad that at least Uganda now has the National Action Plan on Business and Human Rights. How far are we going ahead to ensure that we can read it and implement it to the latter? Can be a question that can be answered a little later, but the conversations keep going. And the Africans here on the continent continue to demand for better. The clock is ticking, and the search for a better Africa starts now. My name is Hakim Wampamba. Until then, good afternoon.